If you are a regular listener of the Vincast, Australia's premier wine podcast, then you would know that myself, the intrepid wino, is a big supporter of small batch, authentic Australian wines. And that's why I made the partnership with my supporter, Different Drop, who are an online retailer that specialise in exactly those kinds of wines. They have scoured Australia for some really exciting up-and-coming winemakers and some really stalwart pioneers of the Australian wine industry to put together an offer that really gives people an opportunity to try the great diversity of Australian varieties, Australian regions and Australian styles. They're very competitively priced. They put together some really fantastic kind of package deals. So you can you can choose some wines for yourself, or you can pick one of their, like a particular variety or a particular region. And as a special offer for listeners of this podcast, if you go to differentdrop.com/intrepidwino, and where you'll find some wines that have been curated for former guests of this very podcast. And then when you make a purchase, you put in the code intrepidwino, one word, and the guys at Different Drop will give you a 10% discount, which is a fantastic opportunity for you to support the guests of the podcast, Different Drop, for supporting this podcast as well, and myself. So thank you very much, guys, for your support of this podcast, and thanks, Different Drop, for championing those great wines. On episode 71 of the Vincast, I chat with Shashi Singh, one half of the Avani Syrah story. Beautiful vineyard on the Mornington Peninsula, making some amazingly biodynamically grown, authentic Syrah wines. Hello there, Vincasters, and welcome to another episode of the Vincast. My name is James Gersbrook, otherwise known as the Intrepid Wino, and my apologies for not managing to get an episode of the Vincast out last week. As you can imagine, coming back from overseas, I was just trying to catch up, and also with the Spring Racing Carnival on and Melbourne Cup, public holiday here in Melbourne. That meant that, people's availability was a little bit difficult. So I'm excited to have a new episode for this week. It's a guest that I've wanted to have on for quite a while. But before I introduce her, I want to do something that I haven't done in a little while. I want to give a few shout-outs. Now, I've been really grateful to hear about people in the wine industry who have been listening to the podcast and enjoying it. And of course, I love when people just randomly tell me, hey, I listened to the podcast, winemakers, retailers, sommeliers, that kind of thing. So I really appreciate everyone's support. Particularly, I wanted to give a particular shout out to Kathy Lane from Fireworks PR, who is a really, really fantastic supporter of mine. She was a guest of the podcast already, and I do highly encourage you to go back and listen to that episode. It's fascinating to talk about public relations as far as wine. But I've had a couple of people get in contact with me who have really expressed how much they are getting out of the podcast, and I really wanted to share that with you. The first person was Andrea, and she's on Twitter at VineChange. She is really pursuing a career in the wine industry, wanting to learn as much as she can. And she was lovely enough to write a fantastic review on the iTunes page as well. The other person that got in contact with me was Amy, who sent me an email via the intrepidwino.com website, and I was really touched to find out that listening to the podcast has in some way kind of inspired her to want to pursue a career in the wine industry, and it is really, really very enthusing for me. It really does fill me with so much kind of encouragement, I guess, to continue creating this content and finding the great stories about the podcast. So thank you very much, guys. Please, if you do enjoy the Vincast, get in contact with me. I'd love to hear from you. And please, it really does help out if you share stuff on social media, but particularly if you leave me a rating and review on the iTunes store. So thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. So my guest for this week is Shashi Singh. Shashi and her husband Devendra moved from India and ended up on the Mornington Peninsula a bit over maybe about 30 years ago. And they ran their own Indian restaurant in Frankston for many years before deciding to completely change, their life and their career by buying a vineyard. And they've created one of the most authentic expressions of the Mornington Peninsula in the Avani Syrah. And Shashi and Devendra will be at the upcoming Rootstock Festival. And I really wanted to have her on and to talk about her story. So it was a really fascinating chat. Please stick around till the end so you can find out how you can get in contact with Shashi to thank her for being on the podcast, and also how you can find out more about the Rootstock Festival. But until then, I'll see you on the other side. Shashi, thank you very much for making some time to be on the Vincast, and welcome. Thank you for coming up on this lovely summery day in Melbourne.
Thank you, James, for giving me this opportunity. No. I feel blessed. Must be my good karma.
The pleasure is mine. And I typically ask my guests at the beginning of every episode if they can remember what their initial interaction with wine was that sort of made them think, oh, this is something that I could do, as a career or dedicate my life to wine.
I think with me, coming from an Indian background, I had no experience in the wine before. And it was in 80s, running the restaurant on Peninsula with my husband. My first interaction or any introduction to wine was through the restaurant.
Yep.
And in those days, you used to get these big companies, they come and make the wine list for you.
Yeah.
And during that time, I think some of the local producers came over and we had their wines, and then we started visiting the vineyards and getting to know the people, the place, and how wine is made. I had no idea before that. Mm-hmm. And that built the interest for me into that. Even at that time, I was not thinking of a career in the wine. And when my children were in year 10, and I started thinking my life has so much revolved around them, what I'm going to do, they don't need me anymore. I started, by that time I had started reading more journals and articles about the wine, and it really interested me.
Sure.
And coming back home as well, we come from agricultural family background, and grandparents are still the sugarcane and wheat farmers back in agricultural state Haryana in India.
So you were born in India?
I'm born in India.
When did you come to Australia?
I migrated to Australia in 82, 83.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was initially, my husband always, he was here. And we ran a restaurant. I was very much full-time mom.
Sure.
And
did you move to marry your husband?
Yes, it was an arranged marriage.
Oh, wow, that's so cool.
And it has all went well so far.
Very well. Seems to be going well. And so where was he living? He was born in India as well.
He was born in India, and he came in 81.
So you were both adults, pretty much?
Yeah, I was 21.
Yeah, okay. That's pretty adult. And so, but it was a migration to, for new opportunities in Australia.
Yes.
And your husband, I'm sorry, I've forgotten his name.
Devendra.
Devendra came. Did he come to Melbourne first?
He came to Melbourne, and he worked in Traralgon. He worked with McDonald's, and then when the Wendy's store was opened, he worked with them, and then during that time, and I think after we got married, we thought, it'd be good to have a little restaurant of our own. So
Yeah, cool.
that's when...
An Indian restaurant?
Yeah, an Indian restaurant.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay.
we've been on Peninsula over 30 years now. We're still there. Yeah.
So you opened an Indian restaurant. Whereabouts in the peninsula?
We were in Frankston for over 20 years.
Nice.
And now we are in Somerville.
Yeah, okay. So you mentioned that your family has a little bit of an agricultural background.
Yes.
Which part of India?
Haryana, which is not far from Delhi, about 70 k's from Delhi. It's an
Okay.
agricultural state.
Sure.
Haryana and Punjab used to be one before, but
Yeah.
they divided in two states. It's very much just agriculture there is the dominant.
And what's the most dominant crop there?
Wheat and sugarcane.
Okay. And so, do you think that kind of impacted on you a little bit as far as the agricultural influence, at least maybe, as far as interest in food, for example?
I think the agricultural influence.
Yeah.
And something there's special about having a land.
Sure.
And growing something. It's
Sure.
just an emotional thing. And I think doing viticulture as well, that's where I kind of stopped and thought back and how the things were done and how my grandparents and my uncles and aunts are still doing it. And made so much sense to me now. While growing up in India for those 20 years, I thought, oh my God, they're doing all these old processes.
Sure.
The science has gone so further, but it all makes sense.
Yeah, it's pretty simple.
Yes.
And so they would be just selling the sugarcane to refineries.
At that time, and make a little bit of jaggery for personal use and for the families.
Well, that's and that's exactly what you're doing as far as wine is. The refinery is the winery when you're actually making the wine, but you keep some for yourself. You have it on your table at home.
I think it has made me understand and respect the people who are in agriculture. A huge respect for them. And I think it should be compulsory for our children to go and work on the farm.
Well, the Australian, I mean, I think Australia needs more people to go and work on farms.
It's just that the respect
Of course.
that I think people who are away from it, they don't understand.
Sure.
It's just a different outlook altogether.
And so you learned how to cook from your family?
Yes, very much home sort of cooking, but Devendra is a trained chef. So
Oh, really? Okay.
I think maybe a lot of things I learned from him.
Sure, of course. So, was it challenging, opening up an Indian restaurant in Frankston back in the early 80s or mid 80s?
I think Devendra is kind of a person, he likes adventures. And
He likes the challenge.
He likes the challenge.
Sure.
And he was not scared at all.
Wow.
From
And-
day one, he
and
wasn't scared of it.
Was it sort of very classic Indian cuisine, or was it a
Very
bit regional?
very regional,
Okay.
traditional Indian cuisine. So most of it coming from north. So most of the dishes were from north.
Is
So,
Devendra originally from the same area?
yes, he is.
Okay.
But he has grown up into a different part of India where I have.
Yeah, okay.
So he's more from Uttar Pradesh, where his family moved a long time back.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah.
So I know initially, it would have been interesting, and still it's a challenge to match wines with Indian food. I'm not sure, but back at that time, were people were customers to the restaurant asking for wine, or were they just sort of happy with beer?
I think in those days, early 80s and 90s, people were just thinking that only beer goes with Indian food.
Yeah.
We'll keep some wine, as I said to you, the rep from the big brands used to come and make the wine list. We had no ideas. It was all learning from there. And it was very different. There was more mixed drinks in those days.
Okay.
People will bring, big cask wine and...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it has changed so much. And I'm so excited that I have learned so much during that process.
Sure.
And to say that Indian food can't go with the wine is not true.
No, absolutely. So the proximity, being close to the Mornington Peninsula, that probably would have had an impact on you. And you said that you started to go and visit some of the producers.
Yeah.
Who were some of the producers back in those days, kind of the early ones to influence you on the Mornington Peninsula?
I think at that time I was still learning
Sure.
about the wine. So we visited the producers that the wines that we were selling.
Of course.
So
But that's a really important step.
yeah. So there was Salma Lauder from the Eline Vineyard.
Yep.
And Wildcroft. We used to sell his wine. That's how we became friend with Richard, who owned. And when we were looking for some land, and he said, my place is going to come up on the market, and that's when it all kind of we thought, oh, this is something, maybe just the land. We still have no plans. What we're going to do with it?
Sure. Okay.
Maybe the connection with the wine, the food, sort of seemed very possibility.
Yeah.
And something we can do. And I've got a chemistry background from back in India. I've got a degree in chemistry.
Yeah.
While I was reading all these journals and articles about wine, I could understand a lot, and the agriculture side and the wine side of it. That's made my interest grew a bit more into it. And because we were selling the wine from this property, we knew a bit more about the wine and the place, and we used to visit regularly. But we had no idea how we're going to do all this about it. We had no previous experience in agriculture or winemaking.
What prompted you to actually want to kind of buy some land and to produce some wine of your own?
As I said, James, initially we just wanted to buy land and do something with it. Okay. That's it. And
you wanted to, it's like, oh, we've done the restaurant. Let's do something different. Okay.
Yeah. But had no idea that it will become day and night job.
Restaurants mostly just the night.
But the small vineyard as well. When you go into a project like that, you have no idea and you anticipate something else. But in reality, after taking the plunge and after a year, you find out, it's not what you thought it's going to be. There's a lot more to it.
So you found out that the property would be on the market, and you kind of said, why not?
Yes.
And then can you tell me a bit about that particular part of the Mornington Peninsula?
It's in Red Hill South.
Okay.
So if you know Stanley's Road, it's right on the top of the hill.
Sure.
So, and it's 15-acre block, just over 9-acre under vine. And it's a very gentle slope, north-south facing slope.
Yeah.
And I think that
initially
I was very scared. So I thought, how are we going to do? I have not even weeded in my own backyard. How I'm going to do this? So Richard was very kind, and he said, Shashi, I'll stay over for a year, and during that time, we'll teach you what you need to learn in this process. And I said, okay, that's comforting. I'm not scared of hard work, and, I'll learn. So that's how, after 1 year, I thought I need to learn more. Because you need a little bit more in depth. I cannot just do what other person's idea of doing things is. I want to know why we're doing this and what will happen if I don't do it like that. So you needed the background knowledge. That's when I started looking for some sort of a course, and I found out that in Epping there was a certificate course, and from Frankston I used to travel to Epping. One day a week.
Is that with NMIT?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I think some friends of mine do some studies there.
Okay.
Or they have done some, yeah. Okay.
And that's where the lecturer who was teaching us, she was still doing a degree at Charles Sturt. And that's how I found out about Charles Sturt. Okay. And I thought I can do a little bit more in depth. And it was really a nice introduction for me to learn the terminology which is used in the vineyards and wines.
Sure.
And I applied for a wine science degree at Charles Sturt, and it was early, I think, 2000. And they said, oh, there's a waiting list for 1 year to get into the wine science. And I said, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. I said, what if I apply for viticulture? They said, yeah, you can start that. So I started a degree of viticulture and then later on transferred it to wine science. So I've done it, just completed 2013, my viticulture and wine science degree.
Wow. Okay. Took you a few. That's
I
like,
took,
and my mum took a while to do her masters in languages. So
I think because when you are studying and you've got a family, your studies are the last priority. The other things,
the work and the bringing in the
family
income and
comes
looking after the
first.
family, of
Yeah,
course.
so that's how I did it. But I think I thoroughly enjoyed it. And during the process, gaining the technical knowledge, going to Wagga, you meet a wealth of people that I've still friends with, and gained through them so much with their experiences.
So
It's been worthwhile.
You would have been doing it by correspondence, and
Yes.
you would have gone to do some residential,
Yeah, I
some
did.
time there.
Yeah.
Was that interesting? I'm please, forgive
No.
me, but I would have thought that most of the students would be, in their early 20s or something like that.
No,
or
James. When I
late
started
20s.
it was very interesting because I had not done any of my studies here. I was very scared, being a gap of, when I finished my degree in chemistry in India and came back here and started a family and everything was new. And then going back again to uni here was a little bit of a scary thought to me. But when I went there, it was so good to know that most of the people doing wine science were people who were doing as a second degree.
Okay.
So there were a lot of people like
Or a
me.
second career.
Or a second career. Yeah, that's what I mean. But being at Wagga, I've seen all the changes, how initially the people, the demographic has changed. Now in the industry, there are more younger people
Sure.
doing the degree. But in those days when I started, it was like people, accountants, doctors, engineers.
Well,
They
I
had
think,
to
but that
really,
was sort of very much in that real boom time for Australian wine, and so I would think that that's probably why there was a waiting list for the winemaking
Yeah,
degree, was
true.
because all the big wine companies were
Yes.
saying we need more winemakers,
Yeah,
but at the
true.
same time, in the economy was it was very strong, and so people were saying, hey, cool, I can just go, I'll just buy some land and buy a vineyard and make
Yeah.
some wine of myself, and
Yeah.
well, I suppose I should go and learn how to do it, and I
Yeah.
guess that's kind of what you guys
Yeah,
did.
true.
But it was probably more as inspiration. It's like, oh no, we want to do something on this land. When you bought the vineyard, how old were the vines?
It was planted in 87.
Okay.
So they was quite old wine. These were established vineyards with all the varieties, Pinot, Chardonnay, Cabernet, a little bit of Shiraz, a couple of rows of Merlot. And
So back in that 80s time, which is like,
Yeah.
let's just plant what people want.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if they're right for this particular
yeah, I
this
think we all
region.
were learning. We are
Sure.
still learning.
Sure, of course.
So it's all learning in progression. We are not that also as France is. They have learned. And slowly, like we have learned, it took me 17 years to learn that how to plant a grapevine.
Yeah, well, they've got a few hundred years on us in most cases.
True.
And so when you first bought it, what were you doing with the land? Were you continuing to make the wine? Was there a brand already
Yes.
well established from that vineyard?
It was, the brand was called Wildcraft. And initially, Richard was doing all the viticulture, and then I learned from him. And the wine was made locally by a local winemaker.
Sure, okay.
Yeah.
But you continued, so you bought that brand as well?
We bought the brand as well.
Right,
and,
okay.
And not knowing anything about the wines, and we slowly found out everything hard way.
Sure, of course. But that's the best way to learn.
That's
I
the
think.
best way, yeah, yes.
So gradually you started to kind of change your way of thinking and wanting to put your own kind of impact on that particular place. How did you kind of start to change the way you're thinking? Because from the sounds of what it was compared to how it is now, it's pretty different. So I'm very interested to kind of find out how your thinking evolved.
I think, James, there I would say that it was a blessing for me to see how the the vineyard was conventionally managed before.
Sure.
When we took over, I changed it to organic, and then slowly to biodynamic.
So what was your thinking? What was your reasoning behind organic, and what was your experience with organic that made you want to convert?
I think on a personal level, I'm kind of believe in sustainability and natural, simple living.
Where did that come from?
That's come from my upbringing, maybe.
Okay, cool.
I think it's my.
That
It's not
that
not just
agricultural
the
influence?
yeah could be. It's not just the way I do my agriculture. That's how I live as well.
Sure.
So like yoga is a big part of me. So I don't need scientific proof. So everything I can see that things do work.
You just feel
And
it.
that's how the feel, the energy.
And my apologies for interrupting yet another fascinating Vincast chat, but I wanted to share with you something. One of the ideas about the Vincast was to introduce listeners to people and concepts about wine, stories, that kind of thing, mostly as a way to encourage people to kind of go and find out more, because there is so much wonderful information about wine. They're great resources, and one of the best resources, certainly in Australia for Australian wine, is Wine Companion. Wine Companion started off as an annual guide written by James Halliday, which basically just catalogued all the wines for that year and gave tasting notes and ratings. And it evolved into, more recently, a wonderful wine magazine, which is written by a number of amazing writers around the country, but also the Wine Companion website, where you can get access to a huge resource of tasting notes and lots of wonderful articles. And as a special thank you for subscribers of the Vincast, if you go to the Wine Companion website and if you sign up for any subscription package, when you put in the code Intrepid30, they'll actually give you a 30% discount, which is an incredible deal. In case you missed it, there was actually a little piece written about the Vincast and myself on there. So I do encourage you to go and check that out anyway, and find out about how you can get access to some amazing wine information. So thanks very much, Wine Companion, for your support of the podcast and for having such amazing content.
And initially,
did you know much about sort of organic agriculture or organic viticulture to kind of think about that conversion?
I just knew about there are better ways to manage things, and organic was one of them. That's how I started first. So a reduction in all the systemic fungicides which were being used on the place.
Sure.
And I did see very quickly that how healthier the plants looked and they became. And then I thought I can do it. Kind of became stagnant, and I thought I need to do more. And then the real eye opener for me was 2004 when we had the biodynamic conference, the big conference in Beechworth, I think it was.
It would have been organised by a former guest of the podcast, Julian Castagna.
Oh yes, that's true. So I think I couldn't go to that. Unfortunately, it was too expensive for me. But I started. The seed planted in my hand. I'd started researching, talking to people. I was at Vogue at that time, and there was a lecturer, Michel Munier, from France, and I wrote to him and spoke to him on the phone, and he gave me a few links and gave me a lot of material and connected me with the people as well. And then that's where I did a lot of my reading, and by reading too, I thought a lot of it doesn't make sense to me. Some make sense to me. It's very much common sense in a lot of ways. I could reflect back home how my grandparents did everything with the moon.
Yeah.
And how did they made their compost, and they did certain things at a certain time.
Which is just sort of inherited knowledge. That's just the way that we know how to do it.
Yeah, true. It was like, I think growing up there, it's in the background, but you don't take much notice. But like it brought all those memories back, and I wished I would have learned and paid more attention then. But it was then again learning, and I thought I have to do this to see the effect of it. And my first spray, I thought, was 500 that I put in 2005. And I was amazed that within a year how my soil started to change. And it was just like a magic, and I was so happy. I said, this is the way to go forward. And I could, myself and Devendra has seen so many changes, how the plants are growing now, how the vineyard looks alive, how much more insect life, how much more bird life we have on the property, and frogs that we are finding. and different, the really
Biodiversity.
and the really harsh hardy weeds that we used to have are like soft weeds. They look beautiful. So I think slowly it's a long learning process, but it makes believe in you. And then I think I was very lucky when I was working with Phillip and looking after all the vines there, and worked in the lab, and I could then started seeing these little differences in how wines behaved too towards sulfur or oxygen. And you kind of put your head together and you think, oh my God, we're not doing anything different in the process. It's just the viticulture, which I've done a bit different.
And maybe that
has made a difference.
Maybe it was kind of good karma that you said, oh no, I'll do viticulture and then transfer. So you started from where you should be starting from, which is from the soils and from the vines.
Yeah, that's what I said. It has to be a good karma. I'm so fortunate to be on that line and to have as my mentor Phillip, whom I have such high regards, and all his philosophies resonate with me, and to show me the path. I could have gone the other way.
This must be all that positive energy that you put into the universe that is giving you something back.
I think saying on that, started looking at that energy level too. I think we'll see things only at a matter level at the moment, but there is another level which is the energy level.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how did you start to convert as far as the vineyards from having planted a number of different varieties to now, if I'm correct, only working with one variety, and a variety that is probably the third child of the region, maybe the fourth after Pinot Gris, actually, which is Shiraz or Syrah.
Yeah.
What was the process of planting more Syrah or converting existing vineyards to Syrah?
I think this was again a learning process, because being on Peninsula, I wanted to make a good Pinot. That's why we went to Phillip Jones.
Sure, of course.
To learn how to make a good Pinot.
He knows how to do that pretty well.
And we did everything, close planting, reduce the cropping level to make a great Pinot. But we found out during that course that Shiraz was the variety which was producing, from my particular place, I won't say, from my particular place, that was the most interesting wine coming out of the vineyard. We did everything with Pinot, but my benchmark was Bass Phillip. It wasn't Bass Phillip.
Absolutely.
It ripened too early. My place is a bit warm. So my Pinot used to ripen in Feb.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
probably one of the biggest enemies of Pinot Noir is to ripen too fast.
Yeah, so it doesn't have that flavor ripening time.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was more suited to Shiraz. That's what we found out.
So what did you said, okay, we're just going to work with Shiraz.
Yes, we made this decision in 2006.
Yeah.
That we are going to just work with Shiraz, the best variety that we can grow from this place. Being small, it kind of economically works for us as well, having the same kind of bottles, closures.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It's one label.
So one label. And why not put your energy into something which the place produces the best? And it's been such a long learning process again, because we grafted some vine, we replanted certain part of the vineyard.
Okay.
And we had those wet years when a lot of grafts died. And we are still pulling those vines
2011?
Yeah. So, still planting.
Wow, okay. And so how many acres or hectares do you currently have under Syrah that are giving you fruit?
Oh, the total place is like just over 9 acres, but fruiting at the moment maybe just about 30%.
Wow, okay.
Yeah,
so the future looks good for Avani Syrah.
Yeah, it was at times, I tell you, I had very depressing times. But I thought, come on, gather yourself up, put your energy, do the right thing as you do in your life.
Of course.
And I don't care if I reap the fruit or not, but do the right thing and keep planting. And one day, if I'm not the one reaping the fruit out of this place, somebody else will. So
now, when you sort of started to think about how you wanted to work in the cellar, were you kind of being recommended wines, or were you seeking out other wines from other producers, particularly as far as Syrah or Shiraz wines, that you started to taste and be influenced by and think about, I like the way they're working. What's particular about the way that they're making this wine?
To tell you the truth, James, I make my Shiraz like a Pinot because that's where I learned.
Okay, absolutely, and that's not uncommon. Like a number of former guests of this podcast do make their Shiraz like a Pinot, like the lovely Gary Mills from Jamshed. I think of his Shiraz wines made like a Pinot, with that whole bunch influence, that kind of thing.
But I don't do any whole bunches in my Shiraz.
No.
It's all 100% destemmed.
Okay.
And I think at present I don't have enough fruit to do separate parcels of fruit to ferment because my land has 3 different kinds of soil there.
Sure. And that's how
so
you
maybe
separate.
One day,
that's how you separate based on the soil.
I would love to do that experiment to see.
Okay.
At present, I'm just kind of mixing everything, whatever fruit I can get my hands on.
A true estate wine.
A true estate wine.
That's true. And so what was it about the way that Pinot Noir is made that you particularly like to use with your Syrah?
I think I learned my wine tasting at a Pinot Noir producer.
Sure.
So
particular Pinot Noir producers apart from Bass Phillip?
Bass Phillip, yeah.
That's pretty good.
Close to Burgundy.
That's a pretty good reference.
That's my favorite wine. And I think I was so much in love with them. And
what about other biodynamic producers, for example?
Yeah, I think from Australia.
Yeah, or from anywhere.
I just have high regards for Vanya Cullen, Ron Lawton, and James Milton from New Zealand.
Yes.
Yeah,
wonderful.
These are the
Pinot.
people. Yeah, I met some of the biodynamic workshops and conferences, and have such a high regard for them, and haven't had the experience to go to France to meet all those iconic biodynamic wines. So maybe one day.
Maybe they'll invite you, and you can say, "Okay, can you pay me to bring over, and can you make my wine for the next vintage? I've got lots of time to spend with you."
I wish. It's my dreams.
So tell me, so you're processing all of the fruit from the estate together, and you said you destem. Do you do any crushing of the grapes?
No, just destem.
Just destem?
Just destem.
Okay.
Put them in the tank. I can't afford a wooden tank at the moment, so all goes in the steel.
Okay.
So about 7-8 days of pre-maceration.
Sure.
Just at the room temperature.
Sure.
And the natural yeast starts in 8 days.
Okay.
So sometimes early if the weather is warm.
About a week. Yep.
Okay. And 2 weeks of fermentation, and then after that 3-4 days post, depending. I keep on tasting my wine, and then just press into the barrels.
What size barrels?
They are just 225 liters Burgundy barrels.
Barriques, yeah.
Barriques. Yeah.
But all mature? No new barrels?
Some years I've had new barrels. 2013
when you can afford it?
Had new barrels. Devendra is very kind to buy me new barrels to experiment. But
Happy birthday.
Yes. But a mixture of old and new. Yeah.
Okay. And then how long do you keep them before you bottle them?
Depending on the year, like 2012 was kept 18 months, usually 18 months.
Okay.
2014 was kept for 12 months. 2011 was kept in old barrels for 12 months.
Does it depend a little bit on how much you have and when the market
I think how the
needs
grapes are. It depends on how the grapes are. Yeah.
You keep it for as long as you feel that you need to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And so when did Avani itself kind of first get released to the world?
Yeah.
Firstly, what does Avani mean?
Avani is a Sanskrit word which means Mother Earth.
Wonderful.
So I think it's so much connected to me. We had Wildcraft, but the connection I always felt was some kind of a missing thing there.
Sure.
And Wildcraft was when the wine was contract made.
Okay.
Working with Phillip, 2009, I kind of was my breakout year, and I started making wine myself.
Sure.
I was still working at his place, looking after his wines and making my 4 barrels of wine. And 2009 was my first release. And 2000, when I started to understand the process more and more, and the importance of making the wine on the property, I was more keen to bring the wine back home.
Sure.
And it was 2012
Okay.
that we set up a small winery on the property. And since then, I've done few vintages there.
So the first vintage of Avani Syrah was 2009.
Yes.
Okay. And how did you sort of find the reception of the wine was, with, for example, sommeliers and with customers?
I think they've been very kind to me. I've always had a positive feedback, which I was very scared, but reassures me that the direction that I've taken is the right one, and keep on improving on my processes on my land and keep on doing that. Yeah.
Do you think an important part of having people find out more about Avani is with for example, when I first met Daniel Honan, who has been a guest on the podcast a few times, he actually came to Victoria and he visited you and said what a wonderful visit it was and wrote about it, that kind of thing. So the bloggers and journalists who have a particular interest in this small sustainable wines. But one of the things that I've talked to him about is the importance of wine festivals, this kind of thing. And this year there's been, there has been one very important event, particularly for biodynamic wines, which was the Return to Terroir tasting. And I'm assuming you went and showed the wines there?
No, I didn't go to the wine. It was Melbourne Food and Wine Festival. I was involved in that, and I think I don't know why I didn't I'm not a certified biodynamic producer. Maybe there is one of the conditions is you have to be certified. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I found out little later about it, so I don't know why I didn't know about it. But they were.
Later this month you will be heading up to Sydney for the Rootstock Festival.
Very excited.
Is this your first time with Rootstock?
No, this is my third time. I've been there
You've
from
been there
day
from
one.
The beginning. Wow.
Yes.
Okay. And you have obviously some customers, I would hope, in Sydney, and you have some in Melbourne, of course. Where else can people find the Avani wines in Australia and overseas yet?
We're such a small producer. I've had requests from overseas, but being very small, I think it's not economically feasible for them. To work on my wine, but
with all those plantings,
one day, we're getting there.
Okay.
They are available in Sydney, Melbourne, and people can always contact direct, and happy to send them over.
So the website, which has the details of how they can contact you, you have a website?
Yeah, it does.
It's just www.avani.com.au.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Do you have any social media accounts? Do you tweet or do you Instagram or anything like this for the young people?
I think I need to learn all that. I'm so behind in technology. I'm so...
Get the kids to help.
They both are going overseas for 2 years to London, so...
Oh, lucky them. Lucky them.
So,
well, that's the beauty of social media, is that they can still help you whilst they're over there.
Thank you, James.
But Shashi, I just wanted to say thank you very much for making some time and joining me on the Vincast today. And I hope that people will definitely come and see you at Rootstock, and maybe depending on what happens over the summer, come and pay you a visit down in the Mornington Peninsula.
Thank you, James. It is so important for people like you, Mike Beanie, James Hurd, everyone who has raised this awareness about biodynamic mines, sustainable agriculture is so important. More people are kind of finding it out and seeing the difference, and we are so grateful to you. I can't.
No, the pleasure is mine. You honour me by being on the show. Thank you again.
Mine. Thanks.
And thank you very much, guys, for listening to another episode of the Vincast. I have been James Scaresbrook, otherwise known as the Intrepid Wino. And I just wanted to quickly correct that the website for Avani is actually Avani, Avani, Syrah, Syrah.com.au, not Avani.com.au. And also you can actually find Shashi on Twitter. She is at Avani_Syrah. Of course, you can follow myself on Instagram and Twitter at Intrepid Wino, and the podcast can be found on Twitter at the Vincast. You can come to facebook.com/Intrepid Wino, where you'll find my Facebook page. Head to YouTube, Intrepid Wino, one word, where you'll find my YouTube channel. Subscribe to that. You'll see some videos of tastings, including myself tasting the Avani Syrah 2014 that Shashi was kind enough to give me a bottle of. And if you want to find out more about the Rootstock Festival, I would highly recommend going to the website rootstocksydney.com. And then you can buy some tickets and head to the event on the 28th and 29th of November. Of course, I would love for you to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher or Player FM or any number of different apps you can put on your iPhone or Android device. And if you do subscribe, it means you get the newest episode as soon as it becomes available. And also, I would really love you to leave me a rating and review. Give me some feedback. Give me some suggestions about guests you'd like to hear on the podcast. It really does help get the word out to potential listeners and also potential guests. But of course, all the information can be found at intrepidwino.com, all the episodes of the podcast, all my tasting notes, all my blog entries about my trips. But I just wanted to say thank you again for listening. I look forward to more exciting guests coming up soon. But until then, bye.